I've got a story that I have to tell you, but don't worry, this one has a good ending. Now, those of you who follow me on Instagram or follow my vlog, you know that 6 days ago, our dog, Maggie, right here, went missing. And I have to tell you the story of this because there's some powerful, cool things that took place, and I just can't not talk to you about it. Now, life has this interesting way of throwing you a curveball, things that you don't anticipate, kind of like in the vlog where Bobby smashed his face at the skate park when he was here. And the last vlog that I published as well, I talked to you guys about these really cool interviews that I had lined up. Like tomorrow, I'm going to meet with Tim Wolf at the radio station. We're going to do a recording. On Sunday, I'm going to meet with Megan Guy. And then in a couple of weeks, I'm going up to Portland, Oregon. And there we're going to interview the Envy guys. And those are things that I planned on. Losing my dog was not something that I planned. And the way it all came back together and my journey is important, and I feel like I want to share that with you guys because you may or may not have ever lost a pet. Maybe you've never lost a family member, but you know, I have to tell you that God has been faithful to us in the midst of this. God cares about the things that we care about. And I can tell you for a fact, these last 6 days of my life have been some of the most challenging days of my life. But God honored my prayer. And that's important. You need to know that because sometimes we go through things. It's even like in the midst of our struggle, in the midst of our challenge, you know, you go through these things where you think, God's not even listening to me. My words are bouncing off the ceiling and God doesn't even care. Where are you, God? And I have to tell you, both my wife and I experienced some pretty low points, some fist-pounding moments, you know, times where you're shouting out to the Lord and you're saying, where are you? But I can promise you, and this story of redemption, this is really a story of redemption. Not just because we have a dog and we think that she's special, but because God cares about the things that we care about. So the way this all went down, like you probably saw a picture on my Instagram last Friday, my wife and I went to Universal Studios. We were going to hang out for the evening, just have a good night. And we left the dog with a dog sitter. And the reason we were doing that was because, not because we needed a night out especially, but because we were preparing for this trip that we're making to Oregon in the next couple of weeks. And our dog, Maggie, you know, she's going to have a place to stay while we're gone. We booked flights and we're going to go snowboarding, and we couldn't really take her with us. So we were making plans and trying to get her introduced to a new pet sitter because our previous pet sitter didn't have availability when we were going to make this trip. It's over Christmas break, so you know that's kind of a busy time for everybody. And we've been using this service called Rover.com, and this is not a paid endorsement for Rover. This is definitely not a bash for Rover because you're going to come to find that these guys have been super awesome to us. But we've been using Rover, and we took Maggie to a new sitter here in town in Port Orange where we live. And we went for a meet and greet, thought it was going to be okay. That Friday, we took her to the sitter, and then we left off on our trip to go to Universal. That night, on our way home, we were headed home. It was probably about 10 o'clock, shortly after 10 o'clock. My wife receives a text message from the sitter, and she says, I'm sorry, but your dog has gotten away from my husband, who was out in the yard taking her out for a last night walk. Of course, you can imagine the panic that ensues in the midst of that, right? Your heart kind of beats through your chest. It's hard to fathom that something that you love so much and you have entrusted to someone is now completely on the loose, and you have no idea where they're at. You don't even know where to begin to find them. I mean, the first thing that you do is you go to the point of origin. And we did. We went straight there. We started searching. And of course, she was nowhere to be found. And we walked the streets in that area for several hours. When we got home that night, my wife called Rover, the service, and those guys immediately went to action. They created a lost pet flyer for us to put up around town. They were very consoling. They were very apologetic. And the next morning, we went about putting up the flyers, which, by the way, they paid for those flyers to be manufactured. They sent them to a place. We didn't have to do anything except for go pick them up. And we went and picked those flyers up, and we started posting those flyers all around town. And everywhere that we could think of to go, everywhere we could think of to put them, we put them out everywhere. And then, because I'm an IT guy, I went to work on social media and doing the work that I could do on the computer. You know, my wife is running around town handing out flyers and hanging up flyers everywhere. The sitter that caused the issue did the same thing. They took the flyers, hanging them up, running the streets trying to find Maggie. I went to work on the technical side of it. I started posting things to Facebook. I found all the lost pet sites that I could find here in Volusia County, Florida, and I started putting posts up on those things. As I was doing my IT work, one of the services that I encountered, something I'd never seen before, was a website called Paw Boost. It's pawboost.com. Now again, this is not a paid endorsement for Paw Boost, but I have to tell you that those guys were spectacular. They have a very easy interface. I was able to go in and put in Maggie's information, and they even have a service that you could subscribe to where they do direct targeted marketing to people in your area, so that they create this social media flooding system, really, to go out and let everybody in your area know, hey, your dog is missing. This is what she looks like. This is her information. This is your contact information. And those guys were fantastic. I mean, we had, over the course of several days, after putting up the flyers that Rover had made for us and all the social media stuff that we had done ourselves and what Paw Boost was doing for us, we had hundreds of people that were looking at her information and sharing her information. I mean, literally, there had to, across all of our things, there had to be well over 1,000 shares just with people in our area. And I have to say, you know, hats off to the people of Port Orange, this city that we live in, and these people that came together, people that we don't even know, our neighbors, because we live in the same city, came together and came behind us. And not only did they share our content, not only did they let people know around them, but there were people out pounding the streets just like we were. We were getting phone call after phone call after phone call telling us that, hey, we saw your dog. We, we're so sorry. What can we do to help? We tried to get her. All those kinds of cool things. On Tuesday, we were getting calls all day long, and we would get a call and we would jump. I mean, we would run to go see where it is that this dog was sighted. The crazy thing is, every time we would go somewhere, we would get these reports of where our dog was, but we never saw her. We never got even a glimpse of her. Never even saw her running in the distance. It felt like we were chasing a ghost. So on Tuesday of this week, we got the best break that we had ever had. We received a call from a family who says, we've seen your dog. They positively identified her, and they were one of 5 additional sightings of people who identified our dog. What was interesting was that she never obviously left the vicinity of where she had escaped. She stayed in that same general area. Now, we live quite a ways away from where we had dropped her off, so while I was hoping and praying that she was going to make it home herself, I was waiting up and staying up every night, believing that she was going to walk into our front yard and I was going to see her through our Ring doorbell. It didn't happen. But we got this break, And we rushed over there. It was at dusk, and we searched and searched. I mean, I went through the woods. I went places where I wouldn't normally go. I'm terrified of snakes and spiders and stuff. But man, I was like climbing over logs and going through weeds that were waist high. It was crazy. But I was determined that I was going to find this dog. My wife was determined that she was going to find this dog. She put close to 500 miles on our car over the course of a couple of days, and that's not freeway driving, that's around town driving. That night when the sun went down and we had searched all we could search, I mean, it was dark. She's a black dog, obviously. Kind of hard to chase a black dog in the dark. We didn't feel defeated. We felt empowered. Now that's different from the previous nights, because those previous nights before that, I mean, there were a lot of tears taking us into sleep for whatever hours or minutes we did in fact sleep. But that night something was different. First of all, we've had some of the coldest nights in the state of Florida that we've had for the entire year of 2017. She's a dog with very light fur. Though she's black, her fur is really thin. And I mean, it was getting down into the low 40s and high 30s at night. That's cold for Central Florida. So that night, though, we were empowered because we knew that God was answering prayer, and He was also giving us hope. Hope to know that she was still in fact alive. She hadn't died. Hope that she hadn't been run over by a car. You know, she hadn't been eaten by an alligator or bitten by a snake or something like that, because people were still seeing her. We had one report that she had actually made her way onto this farm, and she was chasing some chickens around, and they have donkeys, and these donkeys got mad because she was chasing the chickens, and the donkeys chased her out of the farm. And I laugh about that every time I think about it. But that night as I was leaving, it was the same night that we had our Jericho volunteer banquet for Christmas time. And I started thinking about redemption. And I started thinking about how hard I've searched for this dog, how much I've invested, both financially, physically, emotionally, mentally. I mean, I was wholly invested in finding this dog. And I started thinking about the way I live my life in regards to chasing people for Christ. And I thought about, there's a story that Jesus tells in Matthew chapter 18. His disciples come to him and they say, "Jesus, who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And Jesus doesn't scold them or anything, but he starts talking to them about children. And he says, you know, if you want to see heaven, you're going to have to become like these little kids. These little kids are important. And then he talks about how these kids have their own angels. And I was just talking to my wife about that these kids have angels in heaven that are concerned for them. Then he starts talking about the shepherd that has 100 sheep. And one of those sheep goes missing. And he says, doesn't that shepherd abandon the 99? Doesn't he kind of leave them where they're at because they're okay, and go all out to go find this one lost sheep? And he talks about when he finds him, how he celebrates. He celebrates because he's found the one that was lost. The 99 were there and they were okay. But he was happier about that one sheep that was lost that he got back than the 99 that stayed in place and did what they were supposed to do. And I thought about the parallel of that story to my situation in chasing down my dog. And you have to understand that before Maggie, we've had her a little over a year now. I was never a pet person. I had a dog when I was a kid, and we had one early on in our marriage. But I never was a pet person. If people talked about, you know, their dog being sick or something was wrong with their dog, or they lost their dog or whatever, I didn't really think anything about it. It didn't mean anything to me. But when you have this pet that becomes a part of your family and a part of your life, it becomes like one of your children. I've got 2 kids. At this point, really, I've got 3 kids because she's just like a kid to me. And when she went missing, man, I was broken. I realized, though, that we serve a God that is so powerful. He's the God that makes the impossible possible. He can do absolutely anything. And why can't He make my dog come home? He made Balaam's donkey speak, or He gave it the ability to speak and talk to Balaam. I started praying prayers like the centurion that came to Jesus, and he said, Jesus, you don't have to come. I don't feel like I'm even worthy for you to come to my house. But I'm a man of authority, and I know that you're a man of authority. And if you would just say the word, I know my servant would be healed. And Jesus says, man, I've never seen such great faith in all of Israel. So I started praying prayers like the centurion. Jesus, I don't even feel worthy to ask you, but all you have to do is say the word, and I know that you can send Maggie to our front door, and she'll come home. And we'll rejoice just like the shepherd that found his lost sheep. That was the first night. That didn't happen. I woke up the next day, and I'll confess, I was quite angry. Because, the Bible talks about when you ask for something, believe it. And I've been serving God for a long time, and I've come to a place where I believe God, that He is who He says He is, that He can do anything. I truly believed when I prayed that God would send Maggie to our doorstep, I truly believed it was going to happen. I sat up for hours all night waiting for it to happen until I just couldn't keep my eyes open anymore. It didn't happen. So that next morning when I woke up, I was actually pretty angry at God. And I stopped praying like the centurion, and I took on more of a posture of Jacob. The Bible talks about when Jacob left home, he found this place and he wrestled with God. And he grabbed a hold of him and he says, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. And they wrestled and they wrestled and they wrestled. And God eventually touched his hip. And he wrenched his hip, really. And then He blessed him. He gave him what he wanted. Because Jacob was willing to contend and to fight for what he wanted, for what he thought was right. And that's the posture that I assumed. I wasn't willing to let go. I wasn't willing to just accept the fact that my dog was gone. I love this animal. I was not going to take it. And I took on this indignant Jacob posture. And I said, God, I am not going to let you go till you bless me. You have got to give her back to me. You have got to bring her home. You have got to give her back to our family. I can't do this. And every day I got up and I prayed just like that. I prayed those same kinds of prayers. As I left out when we'd get a phone call, your dog is here, and I would drive to go see wherever that was, I would pray those prayers. God, I'm not going to let you go till you bless me. You can do whatever you want to do to me, but I'm not going to let you go. I believe that you're the God that can make the impossible possible, and I need you to do this for us. The next morning, first thing in the morning, my wife is on Facebook and she's doing her thing and connecting with people. Her phone rings and this guy calls and he says, hey, we've seen your dog. I'm here. There's another lady that's trying to get her to come to her, but we haven't found her yet, but here's where we're at. And they gave us the address and we went over to that place to find her. She wasn't there. And as we were driving around, and almost you get this defeat that wants to come over you. You have to fight it. We were fighting that defeat. As I'm making my way through this subdivision, my phone rings and this lady calls me and she says, hey, are you still missing your dog? And I said, yeah, we haven't found her yet, but we've gotten a couple calls this morning. She says, I have your dog. And it didn't really connect with me. I didn't really understand what she was telling me, because you got to understand, we've gotten so many phone calls of people saying your dog is here, there, wherever. But she said, I have your dog. And I said, wait a minute. Are you telling me that my dog is there? Like you have my dog? She's at your house? And she said, yeah, I came outside. She was in my backyard this morning and she was playing with my dogs. And I still didn't get it. It's funny. It's kind of like Jesus and the disciples. You know, they had this moment where there was all these people, and people needed to be fed, and all they had was a couple of fish and a couple of loaves of bread. Jesus blessed it and broke it out, and all it says, like, these thousands of people ate that day off of just a tiny little bit of food. Well, then, just a couple of pages later, we don't know how long it transpired in actual history, the same situation comes up, and you know, the disciples are like, what do we do? What do we do? I don't know. But it's like they saw Jesus provide the last time, but for some reason in our humanity, we always first trust in ourselves. And Jesus was like, man, you guys don't get it. You know, what do we have? And Jesus blessed this little bit that they had and turned it into this awesome meal and fed thousands of people again. So when this lady tells me that she has my dog, I just can't even really understand it. I can't really believe it. It doesn't make any sense. And so I ask her again, I'm like, wait a minute, you're telling me that my dog is at your house right now? You have my dog? And she chuckled and she said, yes, your dog is at my house. She's in my garage. She's safe. Here's my address. Come on over and you can get her. And I yelled out to my wife. She was right around the corner. I yelled out to her and I gave her the address and I said, meet me there. And I rushed off and we both drove over there. And as I'm getting out of my van and I'm walking up the driveway, the man comes out of his house and I see a leash in his hand, but there's a hedge in front of their house. And I can't see the dog. I only see the man with the leash. And as I approach, he approaches and he turns the corner. And I see my dog. I see Maggie. And I lost my mind. Just like this shepherd in Matthew chapter 18. Man, I bet he lost his mind when he found his lost sheep. And I fell down on my knees. I am bawling my eyes out. I can barely speak. And I bend down and I'm holding her little face. And she's licking my face. And she's happy to see me. And I'm happy to see her. And this moment was just, it was unbelievable. It was surreal. It's hard to explain. And I'm able to get her, and my wife is able to connect with her, and they have their moment as well. And then I put her in the van, we drive home, and she sacks out on the couch. And this has kind of been her posture for the last 2 days. As you can imagine, she was out in the cold. She didn't have any food. She's been running the streets, but she's predominantly healthy. She's got a little scuffed up on her paws, and she's got a little spot on her nose. But other than that, she's just tired and just needs to rest. And we're so thankful for God honoring our prayers. Not only our prayers, but the prayers of everybody that we know, our family members, our friends, and the hundreds of people in our community that prayed, that believed, that petitioned, that pounded the streets, that hung flyers, that talked to their friends. It's hard for me to fully express gratitude in a way that I really feel, because the fact that these strangers in our community came together united just for our little dog is a huge blessing. So thank you very much to the people of Port Orange who partnered together with us to make this happen. We are eternally grateful to you guys. It was absolutely awesome what you did. And I can promise you this, because of the experience that we've had, we'll be monitoring those lost pet sites. We'll be monitoring those Facebook posts. And as we see things that we can get involved in, we'll be getting involved in helping you find your pet. Thank you very much. to Rover.com for everything that you did, for staying on top of the pet sitter who had this really unfortunate accident, to creating flyers and connecting with all their other local Rover sitters and getting people to come out and help us look for our dog. Man, thank you guys so much. You were so awesome to us, and we really appreciate it. To Paw Boost, you know, the service that you guys provide is phenomenal. You saved me so much time because you went to work to get it in the hands of the people who really needed to see it. And social media is a powerful tool these days. So thank you guys so much for serving us the way that you did. And even celebrating with us, both Rover and Paw Boost, they celebrated with us when we got our Maggie back. So thank you guys very much. You know, in the midst of our redemption story, it's caused me to really think about my ministry and the work that I do as an action sports guy, and how I use action sports for ministry. You know, do I really pursue people like I pursued my dog? Am I willing to abandon everything to go after that one lost sheep? You know, Jesus tells us in this parable that that's his heart. He's willing to let me be okay for a little bit while he goes and rescues that one sheep. Do I have that same heart? Do I have that same attitude? It's really caused me to think about that, and the posture that I take in regards to how I pursue people in introducing them to Christ, finding the lost, and helping them have a redemption story. Because ultimately, what we really want to see is people come to the knowledge of their Creator, their Savior, Jesus, who died on a cross and gave himself up for us so that we could be redeemed, because we couldn't do it ourselves. In the midst of our story, I want to challenge you in the way that you pursue. Are you pursuing the one? Let's all go chase those ones. I love you guys. Thank you so much. God bless.